How can one harmless dance at a company party spiral into a public confrontation that changes everything? What happens when the woman who laughed it off becomes the villain, and the man she mocked chooses calm evidence over chaos? Why does the real reckoning happen not in anger, but in silence? Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible stories. I'm Mirielle Dane, 32, and I still don't understand how one dance could ruin everything. It was supposed to be harmless. A company party, music, lights, a few drinks. Colin, my coworker, pulled me onto the dance floor, and I said yes because everyone was watching. I wanted to look confident, fun, the kind of woman who doesn't need permission to enjoy herself. People cheered, phones came out, and I laughed when he spun me close. I didn't even see Evan's face until later, tight and pale at the edge of the crowd. He left early, but I told myself he was being dramatic. I said it was just a dance. By Monday morning, the video was everywhere, tagged and reposted, captions calling me bold or reckless depending on who was watching. HR wanted a conversation, and Evan stopped answering my messages. I told my mom it was blown out of proportion, that Evan should be proud to have a girlfriend people noticed. She agreed, said men can't handle confident women. But the quiet after that night didn't feel like pride. It felt like distance, something breaking in slow motion that I kept pretending I could fix. I swear I didn't mean for the night to go the way it did. It was just supposed to be an ordinary office party, free food, music, a few people trying too hard to impress the boss. Nothing serious. I even told Evan before I left that it was just work stuff. He said to have fun, but his tone had that edge I've learned to ignore. He's always been the quiet type, the one who overthinks every move, while I'm the one who keeps things interesting. That's what I tell myself anyway. The venue was a trendy downtown bar with neon lights and music that made conversation feel like yelling. People from my department were already there when I walked in. Paula from accounts waving her drink, Colin leaning against the counter like he owned the place. Colin's that coworker everyone likes, funny, confident, always knows what to say. We've worked together for 2 years, and I'd be lying if I said I didn't enjoy his attention sometimes. Nothing serious, just playful banter. When he saw me, he grinned and said something about how the party just got better. I rolled my eyes, but I didn't walk away. We'd been joking all week about who would win the dance-off HR had promised as a team bonding activity. I told him he didn't stand a chance. He said we'd see. It was harmless fun. The night blurred quickly. Drinks, laughter, a few colleagues filming short clips for the company social page. Someone shouted that the DJ was taking requests. I remember Colin leaning closer so I could hear him say we should give them something worth posting. His breath smelled like mint and whiskey. I laughed and said he better not embarrass me. He pulled me to the dance floor before I could protest. It started light. People clapped and cheered as we moved to the beat. I like attention, I won't pretend I don't. The lights hit just right, and for a moment, I forgot Evan even existed. Then Colin spun me, his hand landing on my waist. It lingered there, long enough for cameras to catch. Someone whistled. Everyone was shouting our names. I heard my boss laughing in the background. It felt like energy, validation, power. When the song ended, I bowed dramatically, laughing, cheeks flushed. Colin whispered that we made a good team. I said, maybe he just needed better rhythm. That's when I noticed a stillness by the door. Evan. He was standing there in his work jacket, holding his phone, watching. My stomach dropped. He didn't say anything, just looked at me, then turned and walked out. I froze for a moment, then forced a smile when people asked if I was okay. I said my boyfriend just doesn't like crowds. Everyone laughed. I joined them, pretending it didn't sting. I texted Evan right away, something like, "You didn't have to leave. It was just a dance. No reply. The rest of the night, I acted like nothing was wrong. Colin bought me another drink, said not to worry about it. He told a joke about jealous men, and I laughed because that's what everyone expected. Deep down, though, I felt the weight of that silent look Evan gave me. Still, I pushed it aside. On the ride home, my phone buzzed non-stop. Tags, mentions, short clips of us dancing. I clicked one. The camera angle made it look more intimate than it was. My hand on his shoulder, his on my waist, faces close under flashing lights. The caption read, "Office couple goals." I laughed nervously, scrolling through comments. Some were innocent, others not so much. "She's fearless," one said. Another joked, "Bet her boyfriend's sweating tonight." When I got home, the lights were off. Evan's shoes were by the door, but he wasn't in the living room. I checked the bedroom, empty. A note sat on the nightstand. Couldn't sleep, went for a drive. I told myself it was fine. He always cooled off alone when he got upset. I messaged him again. "You're taking this too seriously." Still no response. I scrolled through the clips again until guilt started turning into annoyance. Why should I feel bad for dancing? It wasn't like I kissed anyone. It wasn't like I did anything wrong. When I finally fell asleep, it was with the sound of my own justifications looping in my head. The next morning, I woke to my phone buzzing. Messages from coworkers flooded in. Laughing emojis, screenshots, a few saying HR had already reposted the clip on the company page. I smiled, pretending it was flattering. Then I saw the message from Paula. "Your boyfriend didn't look happy in that video." My stomach twisted. I hadn't realized anyone caught him leaving. I texted Evan again. "We need to talk." Nothing. By noon, I was at the office pretending everything was fine. People congratulated me for stealing the show. Colin gave me a wink as he passed my desk. It should have felt good, but instead, it felt like the room was watching for cracks. Around 2, Evan texted, "We'll talk when you get home." I read it 3 times, trying to decide if that was anger or control. Either way, I told myself I wasn't going to apologize for being myself. I said that out loud in the office kitchen, earning a few confused looks from the interns. That evening, I stopped at a cafe on my way home. I rehearsed what I'd say, that he was overreacting, that people need to lighten up. By the time I reached our apartment, I was convinced I was right. Evan was sitting on the couch, calm, unreadable. He didn't ask how the day went. He just said, "You know everyone saw that video." I told him it wasn't a big deal. He said it was to him. I laughed, maybe a little too sharply, and said, "You can't handle a little attention." He didn't raise his voice. He just said, "Respect looks different in public." That line hit harder than I expected. I tried to change the subject, saying people at work loved it. He nodded slowly and said, "I'm glad they did." Then he got up, rinsed his mug, and set it on the opposite counter from mine. Separate mugs, separate spaces. When he went to bed, I stayed in the kitchen scrolling through my notifications, forcing myself to believe I was the one who'd been wronged. The apartment was too quiet. The glow from my screen made the shadows look sharper. At midnight, I heard a soft sound from the spare room. A faint hum, maybe the printer. I thought it was odd because Evan never used it. When I peeked in, the light was off, but the printer tray was warm. A single blank sheet sat there, clean and crisp. I shrugged and went back to bed. I told myself everything would blow over. People forget things fast. By next week, someone else would be the gossip. I even planned to post another photo, something casual to shift attention away from the dance. But when I woke the next morning, Evan was gone again. His mug was clean and dry, mine still half full on the counter. His phone charger was missing, and beside the sink sat a folded napkin. On it, a few words in his neat handwriting. Some things don't need to be said twice. I stood there reading it until the words blurred. For a moment I wanted to chase after him, explain, argue, anything. Instead, I took a deep breath, picked up the napkin, and threw it in the trash. I told myself I wasn't going to be the one who begged. By the time I left for work, the city was waking up. Cars honking, buses hissing at stops. I blended in, makeup perfect, smile ready. On the train, I caught my reflection in the window and told myself I looked fine. No one could tell that something had already started to crack. I still believed I could talk my way out of it. I always had before. By Monday, the story had legs of its own. I walked into the office like nothing happened, chin up, coffee in hand. Everyone was already buzzing about the weekend party. Laughter came in waves across the open-plan floor, and I caught the tail end of a sentence, something about the dance. I smiled like I was in on the joke, even though I could feel my pulse in my throat. Colin waved from his desk, grinning. "The star of the night," he said loudly enough for half the team to hear. A few claps followed. I played along, tossing my hair back and saying someone had to keep morale up. It worked. They laughed. People love confidence. But the smiles faded when I sat down. I felt eyes on me as I opened my laptop. The office group chat was full of new messages. A coworker had uploaded another angle of the dance, clearer this time. The comments weren't just playful, they were judgmental. Someone wrote, "Her boyfriend must be thrilled." Another added a laughing emoji. I told myself not to care. People were jealous. That's what I've always told myself when things get uncomfortable. Around 10, HR messaged me, asking if I could stop by for a quick chat. My stomach tightened. When I entered the small glass meeting room, Jenna from HR was already waiting with that careful, polite smile they train people to wear. She said someone had raised concerns about boundary perception. She assured me it wasn't formal, just something to document since the clip had circulated publicly. I said it was harmless, a celebration. She said perception matters more than intent. I wanted to laugh but didn't. Instead, I nodded, pretending to understand. When I came back to my desk, Colin was typing fast, pretending not to notice me. I whispered, asking if he'd heard about HR. He said not really, but his tone was too light, too careful. I told him someone must have complained. He shrugged, saying people can't handle fun anymore. I clung to that. At lunch, a few co-workers invited me out, but when I arrived at the table, conversation died for a moment. They shifted topics to weekend errands and kids' soccer. I joined in, talking too much just to fill the quiet. Every so often, someone would glance at me, then at their phone. That evening, I tried calling Evan, straight to voicemail, again. When I got home, the apartment was spotless, his shoes lined up neatly by the door. The faint smell of printer toner hung in the air again. I checked the guest room, empty but organized. The desk drawer, the one he never used, was closed and locked. On top of it sat a small folder labeled Household. I stared at it for a long minute before telling myself it was just bills. Later that night, my mum called. She'd seen one of the reposted clips on Facebook. She said I looked beautiful, but maybe should have kept a bit of mystery. Then she added that Evan always seemed too serious for me anyway. "You need someone who matches your energy," she said. I told her Evan was just overreacting, that he'd come around. She hummed like she didn't believe it but wouldn't argue. Before bed, I texted him again. "I love you. Stop punishing me." No reply. Tuesday morning, he was already gone by the time I woke up. His mug was clean again, placed at the far end of the counter, opposite mine. That tiny distance between them made me angrier than it should have. At work, things got worse. My manager called me into her office. She said HR had flagged the video and suggested I let things cool down. Her tone was kind, but it still felt like a warning. She said Colin had already apologized for getting carried away. That part stung. I hadn't realized he'd gone to them first. I asked Colin about it later. He said HR just wanted him to clarify the situation, that he didn't throw me under the bus. They just needed a statement, he said, avoiding my eyes. He added, "You know how these things look." I wanted to ask what exactly they looked like, but my throat was tight. By lunch, the group chat was full of new jokes, subtle, coded ones that only made sense if you'd seen the video. Every ding of my phone made me flinch. That night, I tried to act normal. When Evan came home, I met him at the door, smiling like nothing had changed. He brushed past me gently, said he had a few things to sort. I asked what kind of things. He said, "Personal." His tone wasn't cold, just flat. At dinner, he ate quietly, while I filled the silence with small talk about work. He nodded occasionally, but never looked up from his plate. When I mentioned HR's reaction, he simply said, "That's unfortunate." I snapped. I told him he should have defended me, that he should have told people it wasn't a big deal. He said, "They don't need my version. They have video." The calm in his voice felt worse than shouting. I tried to guilt him, saying everyone was treating me unfairly, that I was the one being humiliated now. He looked at me and said, "You humiliated yourself." Then he stood, rinsed his plate, and went to the guest room. The door closed softly, but it sounded final. The rest of the week blurred into small humiliations. People at work stopped inviting me to lunch. A few whispered when I passed by. HR followed up with an email summarizing our discussion, copying my manager for transparency. Friday night, I went to my mom's place. She greeted me with sympathy and too much wine. She said Evan was making a fool of himself by being dramatic. I told her he'd barely spoken to me all week. She said, "Give him space. Men always come back." When I got home later, the apartment smelled faintly of paper and cleaning spray. The guest room door was open now. His desk was empty except for that same folder, the one labeled Household. It looked thinner, like something had been removed. On his side of the bed sat his phone charger, coiled neatly. I checked my phone. No new messages. Saturday morning, a new video surfaced. Someone had uploaded a slowed-down version of the dance with music edited in. The comments were merciless. "She's definitely not just dancing." I deleted my account for a few hours, then reactivated it out of habit. When Evan came home that evening, I demanded to know if he'd seen it. He said yes. I asked what he thought. He said, "I think everyone already has their opinion." I said he was supposed to be on my side. He said, "I am, just not on your version." That night, I heard the faint click of his phone camera. The sound was soft, almost accidental. I asked what he was doing. He said, "Just noting things." I told him he was paranoid. He said, "Maybe." Sunday morning, I woke up to the sound of the shredder humming in the living room. By the time I got up, the machine was silent again, a small pile of paper dust beside it. I didn't ask. I didn't want to know. That afternoon, while tidying, I noticed a new sticky note on his computer monitor. "Bring forms." I asked what that meant. He said, "Just paperwork." Then he went out, car pointed toward downtown. He came home hours later, quiet, almost peaceful. I asked if we were okay. He said, "That depends on what okay means to you." I told him I just wanted things to go back to normal. He said, "They already are. You're performing and I'm watching." He went to bed early. I stayed up staring at my reflection in the dark window, trying to see what he saw, if maybe I really had crossed some invisible line I couldn't step back from. I told myself again that people forget quickly, that he'd come around once he cooled off. But deep down, something cold had settled inside me. It wasn't fear, exactly. It was the quiet realization that Evan wasn't reacting anymore. He was waiting, and waiting men are dangerous in ways loud men never are. By Monday morning, I felt like I was walking through fog. Every sound in the office hit too loudly. The clicking keyboards, the artificial laughter, the buzz of the printer. I told myself it was just stress, but deep down, I knew it was guilt trying to surface. Still, I straightened my shoulders and put on my practiced smile. The world only believes what you show it. Colin avoided my desk. That was new. Usually he'd stop by to make some joke about coffee or the latest sales numbers, but today he stayed glued to his monitor. I waved once. He gave a small nod without turning his head. It annoyed me more than it should have. Around mid-morning, a message popped up on the work chat, a link to an office gossip thread someone had started. My name was in the headline. The dance heard round the office. My face flushed so fast I had to minimize the window. It didn't matter how professional people pretended to be. Every company ran on whispers. At lunch, I sat with two coworkers who used to adore me, Nina and Leah. I could tell they were uncomfortable. They kept the conversation safe. Weather, the upcoming conference, anything but the thing hanging between us. When I finally asked if people were still talking about the video, Nina said, "It'll blow over." Too quickly. That meant it wouldn't. Leah added softly, "It just looked close, that's all." I laughed like she was ridiculous, though inside something twisted tight. When I got home, Evan was already there. The apartment smelled faintly of detergent. He was in the kitchen, sleeves rolled, calmly wiping the counter. There were two mugs again, his at the far end, mine still half full. I asked if he wanted to talk. He said, "We already have." I told him not talking isn't the same as resolving. He said, "Some things don't need discussion." I followed him to the hallway. "You're freezing me out," I said. He turned, met my eyes, and said, "You're mistaking silence for patience." Then he went into the guest room and closed the door. That night, I sat on the couch, scrolling through old pictures of us, trips, anniversaries, lazy Sundays. I wanted to text him something emotional, but the words sounded fake even in my own head. Instead, I posted a throwback photo on social media, me and him at the beach, smiling. The caption read, "Miss these days." Comments came fast, heart emojis, a few, "Hope you two are okay." But no message from him. Wednesday, my mother insisted on a family dinner. She said Evan should come too, that maybe being around family would soften things. He agreed without argument, which almost scared me more than a refusal. Dinner was at my parents' house, bright, loud, too many opinions. My mother greeted Evan like nothing was wrong. My father tried small talk about work. Halfway through the meal, my sister Tess asked if we'd sorted the party issue. The table went quiet. I smiled tightly. "It's fine. People overreacted." Evan's fork clinked against his plate. He said calmly, "Overreaction implies a misunderstanding." My mother jumped in, saying men don't always understand social things, that women being expressive gets misread. Evan didn't reply. He just kept eating slowly, like her words didn't even touch him. Tess frowned. "Miri, I saw that clip. It didn't look like just a dance." I rolled my eyes. "You believe random videos more than your own sister," she said. "I believe what I see." My mother hissed her name, but the damage was done. The silence felt thick. Evan stood then, excused himself politely, and went outside. When he didn't return after 10 minutes, I followed. He was by the car, looking up at the sky like he was somewhere far away. I said, "You're making me look bad in front of them." He looked over, calm again, and said, "You do that fine on your own." Then he got in the car. I didn't go back inside right away. My mother came to the porch, whispering that he was being unfair. "He's too sensitive," she said. "Men hate being the butt of a joke." That word, joke, stuck with me, because that's what it had been, right? A harmless joke. When I got home, he was in bed, eyes closed. On his nightstand sat his phone and a small notebook. I picked it up when he went to shower the next morning. Inside were short entries, dates, single phrases, party video posted, HR email, household folder moved. My heart thudded. It wasn't a diary. It was a log. I set it back before he returned. At work, things kept unraveling. My manager avoided eye contact. Colin finally cornered me near the break room, whispering, You need to chill. HR's looking at this seriously. I asked if he'd told them something else. He said, I just told the truth. That phrase echoed. The truth. When I got home that night, the air felt colder. Evan had cooked dinner. Something simple, precise. He served 2 plates, one at each end of the table. We ate mostly in silence until I couldn't stand it. I said, Are you planning to punish me forever? He looked up slowly. No, I don't believe in punishment. I believe in record. I laughed, trying to diffuse it. What is that, some kind of weird software joke? He didn't laugh. You'd be surprised how much data tells the story. I didn't sleep much that night. The sound of keys clicking came faintly from the guest room. I thought about getting up, but I didn't. Thursday morning, my sister texted asking if I was okay. I told her Evan was still sulking. She wrote back, He's not sulking, he's done. I ignored it. People love to dramatize. That evening, Evan came home later than usual. He said he'd been downtown. I asked for what. He said, errands. Then he sat at his desk and opened his laptop. I tried peeking over his shoulder, but the screen just showed spreadsheets. I asked what he was working on. He said, sorting things. I told him I wanted to fix this. He said, You can't fix something you don't think is broken. I started crying then. Not because I felt guilty, but because I hated losing control. I said he was being cold, cruel even. He said quietly, Cruelty is pretending not to know what you've done. When he left the room, I screamed into a pillow. Friday, I skipped work and met my mum for lunch. I told her everything. HR, the videos, Evan's weird calmness. She said men do this when they're planning something dramatic. He'll either apologize or propose, nothing in between, she said with a wink. I almost laughed. But that night, when I returned home, the apartment looked subtly different again. His drawer in the hallway table was empty. The filing cabinet was locked. The faint smell of toner lingered. On the kitchen counter was a yellow sticky note. Paper drop, 10:30. My chest tightened. I asked what it was when he came home. He said, Reminders. I said, For what? He smiled thinly. For accountability. We sat in silence after that. The refrigerator hummed, the clock ticked, and I couldn't think of a single thing to say that didn't sound like an excuse. Later, I checked his side of the closet. Half of his hangers were empty, his shoes gone except for one pair near the door. I told myself maybe he'd taken things to the cleaner. That night, I dreamed I was back on the dance floor. Music too loud, faces blurring, the same hand on my waist, cameras flashing. Only this time, Evan was standing closer, watching, recording. When I woke, the sheets were cold beside me. From the guest room came the faint whir of the printer again, slow and steady, like breathing. I lay still, listening, until I realized he wasn't angry anymore. He was preparing, and I had no idea for what. The following week began with rain that wouldn't stop. It felt like the city itself was washing something away, maybe me. I woke to grey light filtering through the curtains and the faint hum of Evan's printer again. He was already dressed, crisp shirt, tie, calm as always. When I asked if he was working from home, he said, Just finishing something. Then he left without a goodbye. I stayed in bed for a while, scrolling through messages. My phone was full of silence. No replies from friends, only muted group chats, and a few unread mentions under the old video. I told myself not to care, but every heart emoji felt like mockery now. When I got to work, the air changed. Conversation stopped when I walked in. My manager called me into her office and shut the door. She said HR had finalized their review of the party incident. No formal action, she said, but it's recommended you maintain professional distance with Colin. Her tone was measured, careful, the kind people use when they're afraid of lawsuits. I nodded, pretending I didn't care. Outside the office window, Colin stood near the elevators talking to someone from legal. When he noticed me, he waved awkwardly. I didn't wave back. At lunch, I sat alone for the first time in months. The cafeteria buzzed around me, but no one joined my table. I stared at my food until it went cold. Finally, I pulled out my phone and texted my mom. They're treating me like a criminal over nothing. She replied instantly, "Ignore them. They just envy confidence. Come for dinner tonight." I said maybe. I wasn't sure I could face another evening of her comforting lies. When I got home that evening, the apartment smelled of fresh paper. Evan's desk light glowed through the half-open door. I asked what he was doing. He said, "Sorting household accounts." His tone made the words sound like a test. I said he was turning into a robot. He didn't respond, just typed something and closed the laptop. At dinner, I tried to spark normal conversation. I told him HR had cleared everything. He said, "Congratulations." I wanted warmth, forgiveness, something human, but his voice was like glass, transparent but sharp. After dinner, I walked into the living room to find his phone on the table. It lit up with a message preview from someone saved as a single emoji. My chest tightened. I didn't dare open it, but I memorized the symbol. When he came back in, I said, "You're hiding things now." He said, "Privacy, you should try it sometime." I snapped that this was childish. He said, "No, it's deliberate." That night, I couldn't sleep. The faint sound of the guest room door clicking shut echoed in my chest like thunder. The next day, my mom insisted I come over. She'd cooked my favorite pasta, the one she always made when I was a kid and needed cheering up. She said Evan just needed time, that men retreat when they're embarrassed. "He'll remember what he has soon enough," she said, pouring more wine. Her house was bright and full of noise. The television, the kettle, the endless chatter that made it easy to pretend life wasn't collapsing. For a few hours, I let her words wrap around me like a blanket. I started to believe her. Maybe he was just being dramatic. Maybe I'd walk in tonight and he'd apologize. When I got home, the apartment was darker than usual. Evan was sitting at the table with his laptop open. He looked up and asked where I'd been. I told him my mom's. He nodded, eyes flat. "She called me," he said. I blinked. "About what?" "She said you're not sleeping well, that you're scared I'll leave." I laughed nervously. "Did she also tell you she thinks you're overreacting?" He didn't smile. "She told me you need understanding. I told her I'm working on it." "Working on what?" I asked. He closed the laptop, stood up and said, "Closure." Then he walked past me into the bedroom. I stood in the hallway, shaking. His calmness had turned from unsettling to terrifying. At work the next day, Colin approached me by the elevator. "We should talk," he said quietly. I told him I was busy. He insisted, so I followed him to a cafe across the street. He said HR had asked for a written statement and he'd tried to keep it neutral, but things looked bad. I told him he could have warned me. He said, "I didn't think you'd care this much." "I care because it's my job," I snapped. He sighed. "Miri, I think it's more than that. Your boyfriend's been asking questions." I froze. "What kind of questions?" "About timelines, expenses, who was there that night, stuff only someone documenting things would ask." I laughed, pretending not to believe him, but my hand shook when I picked up my cup. When I got home that evening, Evan was gone. A note on the table read, "Dinner in the fridge. Don't wait up." Beside it sat a small USB drive labeled with the date. My stomach dropped. I didn't open it. That night, I called my mother again. I told her I was scared. She said not to overthink. If he's planning something, it's just to scare you. He loves you. Her certainty sounded thin. Friday morning, Evan was in the kitchen early. He looked refreshed, calm. He poured himself coffee and said, "You have lunch plans?" I shook my head. "Then maybe visit your mother. You need support." It wasn't a suggestion. I spent the day pretending to run errands, but really, I sat in a park, scrolling through social media. Someone from the office had uploaded a new photo of Colin and me from that night. Both of us laughing, lights blurring behind. The caption read, "Wild Night." Comments were cruel. I deleted my account on impulse. When I returned home, the living room was spotless. His desk was empty except for 2 folders, labeled Household and Utilities. I asked if we were moving. He said, "Not yet." That evening, my sister Tess called. She said Evan had stopped by their parents' house. "He dropped off some things," she said carefully. "Documents, photos." My blood went cold. "What kind of photos?" "He didn't say. He just told Dad to keep them safe." I hung up before she could say more. When Evan came home later, I confronted him. "Why are you involving my family?" He looked surprised, almost amused. "Yours or mine?" "Mine," I shouted. He nodded slowly. "Good. So you're keeping track now, too." I wanted to throw something, to break that expression off his face. Instead, I said, "If you want to leave, just leave." He studied me for a long time. "I will," he said finally, "but properly." That word again, properly, it made my skin crawl. That night, he slept soundly while I stared at the ceiling. Every shadow looked like a signature waiting to be signed. Every breath from his side of the bed sounded rehearsed. I imagined him at his desk, typing reports, saving screenshots, listing every detail of my mistakes. Near dawn, I gave up on sleep and walked into the kitchen. His mug was washed, placed precisely on the far counter again. On the fridge, another note in his small, neat handwriting. Meeting, personal. 9 a.m. I wanted to rip it down but didn't. I just stood there, reading it over and over until the letters blurred. Then I whispered to the empty room, "You can't win if I don't care." But my voice shook. When the sun finally rose, I realized what terrified me wasn't that he'd stopped loving me. It was that he already had, and I hadn't even noticed the moment it happened. Friday came heavy and slow, the kind of day where the air itself felt like warning. Evan didn't speak during breakfast. He moved around the kitchen like a shadow, clean and precise, pouring his coffee, rinsing the spoon, placing it at a right angle on the counter. I tried to break the silence with small talk about the weather. He nodded without really hearing me. When he left for work, the door closed softly but final, like punctuation at the end of something I hadn't finished reading. I sat there staring at the counter until my coffee went cold. The apartment felt too neat, too deliberate. The only sign of life was a faint smell of toner coming from the guest room. I finally looked inside. His printer was still warm, a single page face down in the tray. It was blank, but there was an imprint of words on the roller, a shadow of something recently printed and removed. I told myself he was just reorganizing bills. That afternoon, I met my mother for lunch. She wore her usual perfume and optimism, both too strong. "You look tired," she said. "He's not worth your sleep." I told her I wasn't the one losing sleep. He was the one acting like an accountant tracking emotions. She laughed, called him obsessive, said men like that only bluff. "Let him play serious," she said. "He'll come crawling once he sees you're unbothered." I wanted to believe her, so I did. When I got home, the apartment lights were dim. Evan was at the table sorting envelopes into 2 neat piles. I asked what he was doing. He said, "Tidying." I pointed out that everything was already tidy. He said, "That's how I like it." I hovered near him, trying to sound casual. "You've been different lately." He didn't look up. "Clarity does that." "What does that even mean?" He closed one pile of envelopes with a paper clip. "It means I'm handling things properly now." The way he said "properly" made my stomach twist. "So this is about revenge?" I asked. "No," he said calmly. "It's about balance." I laughed too loudly. "You're ridiculous. Nobody cares about your balance sheets of emotion." He finally looked at me, eyes clear, steady. "Then you won't mind if I keep mine." The silence after that felt like being trapped underwater. I tried again, softening my voice. Evan, we can talk. We can fix this. He shook his head. You don't fix something by pretending it isn't broken. I wanted to throw his words back at him, but my throat was too dry. I turned away, went to the living room, and turned on the TV just for noise. The laughter track from a sitcom filled the room like fake normalcy. He stayed at the table, sorting his neat piles until the sound of paper clips clicking became unbearable. That night, I couldn't take the quiet. I sent a text. Can we please talk like adults? He didn't reply. A few minutes later, I heard him typing in the guest room. I knocked. What are you doing? Documenting, he said. Documenting what? He didn't answer. I pushed the door open a little. His laptop screen glowed with rows and rows of folders, labeled by date. You're insane, I said. He looked up, unbothered. Maybe, but I'll be organized. Something in me snapped. You want to play the victim? Fine. But don't expect anyone to feel sorry for you. He sighed quietly. You've already made sure of that. I slammed the door and went to bed alone. The next morning, his side of the closet was emptier again. A suitcase was missing. On the counter sat another sticky note. Meeting, 8:45. I tore it up and threw it away. Around noon, my sister Tess called. You should talk to him, she said. He came by Mum's yesterday. My grip on the phone tightened. He what? He brought folders, said it was for safekeeping. Mum thought it was financial stuff, but... She hesitated. There were photos, Miri. Screenshots. Messages. I felt the air leave my chest. He's showing people private things. He didn't show them, just left them sealed. Said you'd understand. I hung up. I didn't want to hear more. That evening, I waited for him to come home. When he did, I stood in the hallway blocking his way. You went to my mother's house, I said. He nodded. Yes. Why? To make sure the truth doesn't vanish when stories change. You're disgusting, I spat. You're trying to humiliate me. He took off his jacket, folded it carefully. No, I'm making a record so I don't have to say anything. I laughed again, sharp and shaky. Do you even hear how insane you sound? He met my eyes. You said people forget fast. I just don't want to. He walked past me, calm as always, and disappeared into the guest room. Later, I scrolled through my phone looking for something, maybe proof that I wasn't the villain here. Old photos of vacations, dinners, anniversaries, all the times I'd been smiling next to him while secretly rolling my eyes. It all looked fake now, every grin rehearsed. I deleted half of them. When I finally crawled into bed, he was still typing. The clicking never stopped. Sunday morning, he woke early and dressed neatly, like for church. He told me he had a few errands. I asked if he wanted breakfast. He said, not hungry. Before leaving, he paused by the doorway. Miri, I'm not angry anymore. That's supposed to make me feel better, I asked. It's supposed to tell you it's done, he said quietly. Then he left. The apartment felt hollow without his quiet movements. I wandered through the rooms, opening drawers, trying to find what he'd taken. The guest room was nearly empty now. The only thing left on the desk was a single USB drive, labeled with yesterday's date. I stared at it for a long time but didn't touch it. By evening, I called my mum again. She said he'd stop by one more time, dropped something off for Sarah, his sister. He looked peaceful, she said, like someone who's decided everything. That night, he came home around 10. He looked tired but calm. I waited in the living room, pretending to watch TV. When he finally sat down, I turned off the sound. We need to end this Cold War, I said. He looked at me for a long moment, then nodded. You're right. So? I'll handle it properly, he said. The words landed like a door closing. Properly, I repeated. Meaning what? Divorce? Moving out? He stood. Meaning fair. You'll see soon enough. I followed him down the hall, voice shaking. You can't just decide everything without me. He stopped at the door to the guest room. That's what you did at the party, he said. You decided for both of us. He closed the door behind him, gentle but firm. I stood there for a long time, staring at the thin line of light under the door. The printer started humming again, quiet and steady. I pressed my ear against the wood and heard the faint beep of a phone camera. Then a new sound, a drawer sliding shut, a soft click of a lock. By the time the noise stopped, the apartment was completely silent. I went back to bed, heart pounding, still trying to convince myself I had control. But deep down, I knew whatever he was planning wasn't a bluff. It was preparation, something precise, methodical, and final, the kind of thing Evan would call proper. And though I didn't want to admit it, part of me wanted to see what he meant. It happened on a Tuesday morning, bright and ordinary. I was walking into the lobby of my office building, coffee in hand, rehearsing a casual apology in case Evan called. The elevator doors opened, and there he was. Calm, neat, holding a small envelope. Behind him stood a man in a suit with a clipboard. Evan didn't look angry. He just said my name softly. The man stepped forward and asked me to confirm my identity, then handed me the envelope. I froze as people passing slowed to watch. My boss, Colin, even glanced from the mezzanine. I tore it open before I could think. Inside were formal papers, notice of separation, acknowledgement of reputational harm, request for return of shared property. Evan had signed everything already. The air around me felt thin. I looked up, tried to laugh it off, but my voice cracked. You really had to do this here? I asked. He nodded once. It's the only place you wanted an audience. Then he turned and walked away, calm as ever. The man with the clipboard thanked me for my time and followed him out. People were staring. My hands shook. The papers slipped from my fingers and scattered across the lobby floor, while my coffee cooled beside them, untouched.